I feel like we made a lot of strides. There's a lot of good things on tape, but just like always, there's a lot of stuff that we need to keep on improving on. Biggest thing is just consistency all across the board, I'd say.
Any position group standing out to you? We've heard a lot about the defensive line, but any group standing out?
I feel like each position group has taken their own strides in different ways. I'd say the position group that sticks out the most has probably been the defensive line. And it's really just been the depth behind them also. I just feel like we have more guys. We feel like we can play inside and outside up front.
Yeah, what does that allow you to do? Because we see Devin Tompkins sometimes lining up on the outside, and Jade and Jakeem. What does that allow you to do as a defense when you can move those guys around?
It allows us to be a lot more creative as far as where we place guys. We don't do it a lot in spring, but it'll be more like when we're game planning as far as how we set fronts, having guys playing in certain spots. But right now in spring, we've just tried to cross-train as many of those guys as we can to be just defensive alignment across the board. And it's not everybody, but it's the guys who can do it. So like a guy like Dev, Dev has seriously played from nose all the way out to end, and he's done an outstanding job.
Who do you think's going to get to the quarterback this year? Who's going to lead the team in sacks?
That's tough to say. If you ask the room, the first person to answer would be easier. So, he's a impactful guy. Even though he's an inside backer, he's one of our best pass rushers, and we use him in a bunch of different ways, and he's just an impactful guy.
How does that extra size up front and depth allow you to do different things, just overall in the defense? What's it open up for you having that extra girth up front?
There's some fronts that we weren't able to get in that we'll be able to. And I think it'll just help us just over the course of the entire game, just staying fresh. Because like I said, we have more guys inside that can play. It's not just like 3 or 4. We feel like we have like 5 or 6 guys that if they're in the game, we can call anything on the call sheet.
There's a lot of intrigue for Ja, but he hasn't played a lot of football. What sense do you have from him at this point in terms of what you truly have with him?
He's still raw. He still has to develop, but from his first snap out there, like his size and his power, like it has an impact on the entire defense. So the biggest thing with him is just consistency. He's shown that he can make just about any play, but it's just he needs to do it on a consistent basis.
When it comes to evaluating very large defensive tackles. I know a lot of them, especially in high school, just get by on their size.
Yeah.
How do you determine like a guy who's just getting by on his size versus someone who really does have that technique, but it just kind of needs to be brought out in him because he's not used to using it maybe?
That's something that I'm still improving on, but for me it always helps when you can see him in person. That clears up a bunch. But off tape, you're really just trying to see, like, does he play with his hands? Because you're right. A lot of guys, you're just bigger, stronger, so you don't need any technique at all. You're just beating the guy across. So we're trying to see, like, how does he play with his hands? Has this guy been coached up at all? Or when we get him, is it going to be, like, just a project?
Ja Jarrett, big guy, just in general. With him in that sense, how did you determine, like, this is a guy who does have these skills that versus just being a big guy who had some conditioning questions while he was at Georgia?
Well, for him, it's his size. It's the way he moves at his size. Like his burst, his twitch, his explosion off the ball. You don't see a lot of guys his size get off the ball like that. So we just felt like everything else we'll be able to coach up as soon as he gets here. And again, he still has a ways to go, but you've seen him get better and better each practice, just as far as hand placement, getting off blocks, making sure he knows where he's supposed to be aligned, going the correct direction.
I know Keyshawn played primarily nose when he was at Kentucky, and Ja played a little bit of both. Do you envision Ja being able to do either?
Yeah, I envision them both.
3-tech and nose? Both switching up? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How much of those two spots sort of changed throughout the last few years? Just nose and defensive tackle and having it be interchangeable?
I think when we're in nickel, it's really interchangeable because if a team like comes out in 2x2. You could be the nose, I could be the tackle. They motion the tight end. Now I'm the nose, you're the tackle. When we're in base, that's where you really have that true nose. And you have a guy that just plays in that spot only. And we have a handful of guys that can play nose, but we try to have as many of those guys as we can have the ability to still play three, just so they can be every down guys.
You first look at Jakeem this spring. I know you worked him inside and outside. Do you have a sense for what he does best?
He does everything good. I've just been impressed just taking that jump from high school to college, reclassifying. I knew he was going to be a good player. I just didn't know, what that transition period to college was going to be like. And his first week out there, he doesn't look like he's in high school at all. He looks like he's in college. But we've played him across the board. I think he gives us a lot of position flex, similar to Dev. So it might be something where it just depends on the week, depends on who's healthy.
Whenever there's a 5-star guy like that, so high profile, the expectations on the outside are always, it's going to be immediate, it's going to happen right away. How fair is that with a guy like Jakeem?
We don't put expectations on him. We just want him just to keep on getting better and better each day, and he's going to have an impact on our defense.
How rare is it to have a prospect who, he played so few games in high school that he's able to now translate
it's
that.
Rare. I knew he'd be good, but just his first week, it just caught me off guard. He looks like a grown man out there, and just seeing his strength, the way he gets off blocks, his ability to play end, to play 3-tech. He's played shade. He's played just about everywhere up front, and he's done an outstanding job.
I know, obviously, you guys haven't played a game yet, but is there any element in which you can kind of see that he hasn't played a ton of games at a high level?
Well, I think the more we get into our installs, and then you start seeing the guys think, and then you start seeing them, okay, what direction am I going? They move, so I need to go from a 4 to a 3. It seems small, but stuff like that's big.
How do you balance giving a guy what he can handle versus too much, playing different spots, pulling back, giving more? How does that work?
In spring, we try to do everything very, very slow. We want guys to have an understanding of the scheme, but at the same time, we want guys to be uncomfortable. So I'd say after week 2 or 3, we want guys to be uncomfortable, but not to the point to where you're playing too slow. So that's just something that we just try to engage as a staff. And certain individuals, they handle it better than others. So, there's some guys that at the end of spring, we used at more spots than others because other guys we felt like we had to pull back some.
How's Braylon Conley progressed this offseason? We've heard he's made some nice plays. What have you seen from him?
He has. The biggest thing for him, he's been more consistent. Since he got here, he's shown that he can make plays. At that position, it's just about consistency. It's not about how good your good plays are. It's about how bad your bad plays are. And he's done a very good job of just narrowing that gap.
You were pursued by another program this offseason. Why did you stay at USC?
I'm just excited about the direction of the programs. Love the staff. Love the players here. Just couldn't imagine myself coaching anybody else.
Yeah, it really feels like you guys are building something. And to you, in this build, what does a successful year 2 look like?
Being better than year 1. Our goal when we got here was we don't care what we were ranked before. Let's just be better than before. And that's the same goal we have this next year.
Did it make your decision to stay any harder that it was Penn State, that is your alma mater?
It was a little tougher. Haven't been back there really since I played. But again, just the people we have here, it was just too tough to leave.
I know you looked at Kamari at nickel a little bit this spring. Is that a spot that he could actually end up at, or is it just more of an experiment thing?
We played him in the slot at times in the fall. We have different packages where you're going to see him playing safety. You'll see him in the slot. You'll see him at dime. We're going to play him kind of all around. We just think he's a guy that, outside of corner, there's really nowhere on the field he can't play.
So how has that nickel spot overall then developed?
It's still a competition. We've had a lot of different body types in there. We've had some corners in there. We've had some safeties in there. We worked some inside backers in there. And then we're doing a lot more stuff at a base where you might see a guy like Braylon Shelby or something like that in there.
When you guys shut down Eric, or when Eric decides to take the red shirt last year, how much did that change this defense and kind of what you're able to do, given that he's such a versatile weapon?
We just weren't able to do quite as much. There's not a lot of inside backers that can do all the stuff that EG does.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have him on the field, you can get very creative. He can play nickel, he can play Mike, he can play Will, he can play Sam, he can play end. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do all that stuff without subbing can create issues for an offense. And when we didn't have him, you just kind of lost that element. So we're excited to get him back.
I remember when he first came here, he talked about Micah Parsons being kind of an influence on how he wanted to play. Seems like he's kind of stepping closer to that, right? Being able to play coverage, middle linebacker, on the edge.
Just like his size and length and space, like it's hard to really compare to anybody. Mm-hmm. He's his own guy.
Mm-hmm. We didn't get to talk to him this spring. How did you see him deal with that setback last year? He started the season so strong and then had to shut things down and wait and bide his time. How did you see him emotionally, psychologically deal with that?
Man, it made him hungrier. When he got back for that bowl prep, it was the hardest I've seen him in practice, the most inconsistent. When he came back for spring ball, his weight's been consistently over in 220. Just from his communication, just from the details, you could just tell he's taking a lot more serious this time around.
He's had numerous linebackers coaches come through here, using him all in different ways. How have you seen Rob maybe use him or unlock something different about him, maybe compared to what you've seen before?
Rob does a great job of, again, we always try to make complex simple, and Rob does an outstanding job with that. I feel like EG and all those guys, you just see them playing faster and thinking less.
But the cornerback picture, what did you see from the competition there, and how is Marcellus coming on?
I feel like the cornerback group the cornerback room as a group made a ton of strides. It's still open in competition. We had different guys going with the starters each day. We want everyone to get a fair shot. Everyone did some good things. Everyone has things they need to improve on. So now we're just looking to see who's going to separate themselves from now until the end of camp.
The Carlos didn't think he would get this extra year. It's kind of a bonus for him. Mm-hmm. What was it like getting a veteran guy back in that room, and what more can he still show from his skill set, his game?
It was huge just because we lost so many guys. So having some guys in the room that have played in this scheme are huge. And then a guy for D-Nick, like he's still somewhat new to the position. So even though he's a senior, like there's still things he needs to improve on. So you look at week 1 to now, like he made a ton of strides.
For the most part, when transfers have come in, veteran transfers, they've sort of grabbed a starting spot right away. Mm-hmm. With DJ Harvey coming in, what did you see from him and his potential use?
In position flex, we feel like he's a guy that can play outside, he can play inside, he can play field, he can play in boundary. He's played against good competition. He's competitive, sticky in coverage. He'll tackle people. So we just felt like, especially with the older guys that were leaving, we just needed some guys that we knew had done it before.
Is there Jalen Smith there? I mean, people have talked about him, just kind of versatility, ability to tackle, all that kind of thing.
I would say the thing about Jalen Smith that reminds me with him is the physicality aspect of it. There's times where you see him getting off blocks or you see him making a tackle, and it does look a little bit like a J-Rock. Outside of that, I'd say they're different players.
He has a big connection with Kamari, growing up together. Do you see that manifest on the field or translate?
It does. You see them talking more. You see them talking after plays. You see them spending time with each other off the field. But I feel like that's kind of made the entire group a little bit tighter.
Kamari makes the decision to come back when it seems like he could have been drafted pretty high. Is that something you expected? Was that a pleasant surprise when you heard from him? Or?
I knew it could go either way, and I supported him in whichever decision he made, but I was ecstatic when he decided to come back just because I do think that there's room for growth, but then I also know what he means to this defense.
What is the room for growth?
I think we're going to I think the position flex is something he's already put on tape, but I think we're just going to continue to increase that and just communication and just really just taking that next step and being the leader of the defense. This is really just his secondary now.
Did he call you? How did you find out that he's coming back?
He did not call me. I saw it online.
Does the size of the defensive line allow you to do anything that you couldn't necessarily do last season?
I think it's going to depend situationally, but like I was saying before, there's definitely some fronts that we like more that we didn't have as much this past year. Hopefully it allows us to blitz when we want to and not because we have to, so we can do some different stuff from a coverage standpoint.
And then with Kamari, I think he's going to be the only guy who's ever played 3 years with you as a defensive coordinator, right?
Yes.
It's pretty rare that that's just one guy. What does that mean to you, and what does that allow him to do? Like, now he's going to be even more of an expert than anyone else.
Yeah.
Is that a big reason why he's being so versatile and moving around?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him, it's been cool. Like, each year you've seen him take steps. Like, some guys you might coach for 2 or 3 years and they're really the same player. You've seen him take steps each year, not just physically but mentally also. So each year he understands his scheme more. You can put more on his plate each year, and that just allows us to always make sure we can put our best 11 on the field. And he's kind of like that plug that can just feel it.
When you look back on last season, the new conference, what were some takeaways you had about being in the Big Ten that you can use for this upcoming season? I know you might have to think for a second.
Just the physicality of the conference. Like, in the Pac-12, you might play Utah, and then you have like 3 or 4 weeks before you play Oregon State. And you might have 3 or 4 weeks before you play Arizona. Whereas in the Big Ten, it's every single week. So it's just from a roster standpoint, making sure that we're built, but then also how are we recovering? How are we taking care of our bodies? How are we taking care of these kids in practice to make sure that we're healthy? I think all that stuff plays into it.
Going back to the D-line, which of the returning interior guys have made the biggest leap? And then the guy we haven't heard really anything about is Carlin Jones. Where is he at with everything?
In Carlin, we didn't get a chance to see much because of injuries.
Yeah.
Since he's been healthy, this is really his first time on the field. He's been doing an outstanding job. As far as guys interior, I hate singling just one guy out because everyone's been doing good, but I'm going to say Dev. Just because I feel like Dev is taking a big step inside, but he's also taking a big step outside. And I've just been super impressed with just how he's grown on and off the field, and he's really surprised me this spring.
What's the goal up front in terms of just number of guys that can contribute? Where do you feel you are right now?
We feel like we're good. We feel like we have enough depth inside and outside to where, we have 2 deep plus a couple others to where, we can go in the entire game. And it doesn't have to be where we just have 3 interior guys and 3 guys on the edge, and you just have to make it work with those guys all game. So I just think our guys will be able to stay healthier and fresh.
I know Connor asked about it earlier about the pass rush. What gives you confidence that you will get more sack production than last year? What do you see that makes you believe that?
I think we've done a better job just this spring affecting the quarterback. And it's not always with sacks. Sometimes it's just compressing the pocket. Sometimes it's stopping the run. So it's putting you in better situations to where we can get after the quarterback. I'd say that's probably going to be the biggest thing is, can we be better against the run? So now that gives us more opportunities. We're on second down now. We can get after the Q instead of having to stop the run twice.
What was it that stood out to you most about Keyshawn in terms of pursuing him in the portal?
He's a pro. He reminded us off the field of Gavin almost. And even though he hasn't been with us in spring, the last couple weeks he's able to do walkthroughs. And since he's been out there, just you feel like you have a pro out there. He knows all the checks. He communicates more than everybody. You trust him out there.
Despite just stepping into the defense,
Yeah.
he's still able to
Yeah.
communicate more than
Yeah.
What have you learned about the linebacker depth behind Dez and Eric?
We've been getting all those guys a ton of reps. Depth-wise, I feel like we have a good group that can play both Mike and Will. But we still need to make a ton of strides. And I thought Jaden did an outstanding job. I feel like Tone, his transition from DB to safety in the middle of the fall, that can be tough sometimes. I think now that he's had an entire offseason in that room, we've seen him and taking strides. Garrison's improved, so all those guys have improved.
What's the best way to utilize Eric Gentry? Million dollar question.
The best way to utilize him is to keep the offense guessing.
Okay. And with a guy with his injury history, how do you balance not wanting to use him too much to put him potentially in harm's way, but it's football and you kind of have to deal with it?
You know, he's a guy you never want to take off the field, but again, because we have some depth, we're going to have to take him off the field at times. Because again, I think it's important that we keep him healthy for the entire year. So there might be times where on third down you don't see him on the field. There might be times where we let Jaden play a drive or two, just to ensure that we can keep him healthy.